Hi there everyone, especially to the FEDUC 2 students. Welcome to our new lesson, the education during the medieval times. At the end of this session, you are expected to describe the education during the medieval times and of course analyze the influence of chivalry, guild system, medieval universities, and Islamic education to the modern educational system. If you could remember, after the death and resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ, his disciples preached the Gospels to every part of the world. So as a result, the entire Roman kingdom and the rest of the world heard the Gospels. So many were converted to the new faith. However, the Christians suffered all kinds of persecutions in the hands of the Roman emperors, such as Nero, Vespasian, and Julian. So the religious leaders of both the Jews and the pagans were persecuted, resulted in murder and execution of many Christian leaders. So let us take a look at Saint Paul. He was beheaded under the emperorship of Nero. Peter was crucified upside down. John the Beloved, he was submerged in boiling oil. So the persecution of Christians by the Romans continued for centuries. So let us discuss the Christianity education as an instrument of salvation. Constantine I took over as emperor of the Western Empire in AD 306. So on October 28, before the Battle of Milvian Bridge, Constantine saw a vision. Before him, in the sky appeared a flaming cross with the inscription "In hoc signo vince," meaning in the sign of conquer. So from the sign, Constantine believed that it helped him become victorious over the Emperor Maxentius in a battle. So that is why he was able to control the entire Roman kingdom. So from there, Constantine issued the Edict of Milan, which ordered the cessation of persecution toward Christians and gave them the same rights as other citizens. So Constantine proclaimed Christianity as the official religion, and from there, it paved the way towards the establishment of the religion known and professed today by almost 1/5 of the world's population. So during the Roman Empire, Christianity became more influential. So early Christian Church took the responsibility of educating the people. Please highlight that the Christian education aim was to work for the moral regeneration and salvation of an individual. So that includes reaching of what they considered lost souls. So that is why church had established schools. And of course, since it were run by the church, the priest and other members of the clergy were the early teachers. So during the time, the church was able to set the hierarchy of officials to manage the church activities. So of course, we have the Pope, from the Latin Papa, meaning Father, the Vicarius Filii Dei, or the representative of Christ here on earth. So he was named the universal head of the Roman Catholic Church. So under him were archbishops, followed by bishops, priests, who took care of parishes in towns and cities. So under the Christianity, we have the catechumenal school, catechetical school, and of course the Episcopal school. The catechumens, they are the probationers or the new converts. They were given an adequate introductory lessons on basic doctrines and dogmas of the church. Of course, classes were conducted in catechumenal school where they were prepared for baptism. Of course, they have to pass the stage of instruction, the baptism, and of course, trial for Christian life before they could be able to be called the full-fledged members of the church. So the catechetical school is a ground for another stage of learning for the new converts. So in this school, they were given in-depth training. So this would help them become strong in their faith and against the attack of other beliefs. So in order also to spread their religion, they were tasked to teach the new probationers. So this school prepared adults for baptism in the early Christian church. So Episcopal schools were organized by the bishops to train the clergy in the churches under their supervision. So these schools were housed in cathedrals, the palaces of bishops. They were also known as, of course, the cathedral school. So they served as the only educational institution in the West after the total collapse of the Roman civilization. Let's proceed to monasticism, education as a moral and religious discipline. So at this time, the church was growing in number and strength. And of course, the church adherents, they claimed that perfection was necessary for the salvation of the soul. And how is perfection achieved? So they believe that one can achieve perfection by first denying oneself of worldly pleasures and activities. Number 2, contemplating on and studying the Word of God. Number 3, living an ascetic life. And the last, become hermits. So Christians beautified and exalted their soul by neglecting the body and denying its worldly appetites. So it's the direct opposite to what pagans do, which is to beautify their body and neglected the soul. So that practice gave birth to monasticism. Monasticism, from the Latin word mono, which means alone. We have here the regular members of the clergy. We call them monks. They took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Poverty means renunciation of material and worldly interest. Chastity, the abstinence from sexual relations. And obedience, the deference to one's superiors. The monastic life was entirely governed by the rule of Benedict, a code of life which was advocated by Benedict, a Roman patrician who fled from the corruption of Rome and founded a monastery in Monte Cassino. So the rule of Benedict contains the code consisting of 73 articles which deals with how a monastic life should be led. So it also prescribes how a monastery should serve as an asylum to the poor, injured, sick, and distressed. So by the rule of Benedict, the monks devoted 2 hours each day to reading the Bible and writings of the early church leaders known as the Fathers. They also engaged in manual labor, introduced new processes to be used in producing craft articles from wood, metal, leather, and cloth. So the virtue of a monk was measured by his originality in devising ways to mortify the flesh. Mortification can be in the form of fasting, getting by with little sleep, wearing insufficient or uncomfortable clothing, assuming painful and extremely uncomfortable bodily postures, keeping the body unclean, binding the limbs, and loading the body with chains and weights so as to reduce and even destroy the natural and worldly desires of the body. So the monks did not know that these practices could weaken and even destroy the mind. So despite this bodily punishment, the monk devoted much time and attention to reading, studying, and writing their thesis, thus perpetuating Benedictine ideas and practices that were laid upon by the shoulders of the church in the absence of secular schools. So monastic education reached its pinnacle of efficiency during the reign of Charles the Great, or Charlemagne, as the Holy Roman Emperor. Charlemagne wanted to unite all sectors and ethnic groups in his empire, but could not do so in the absence of the common language, culture, and ideals. So instead, Charlemagne established a school in his palace to carry out his reforms and further the education of the sons of nobles and the members of royal family. He hoped to produce intelligent administrators both in the church and state. To enforce his decrees and educational programs, Charlemagne bestowed upon his missi dominici, or official messengers, the power and authority to enter monasteries to observe whether his orders were carried out. For the medium of instruction, the monastic schools use Latin. Of course, they also have instructional materials like books. And then for the strategy of teaching, you're able to use dictation, memorization, meditation, dialectic, or Socratic method. So during the time of Scholasticism, there were constant attacks of people questioning the basic tenets and doctrines of the Roman Catholic Church. So Scholasticism was a philosophical system of various Christian thinkers who sought to solve general philosophical problems such as faith and reason, will and intellect, realism against nominalism. Realism, a philosophical doctrine that states that universal exists outside the mind. So when we say universal, it is a term that refers to a thing in its entirety. Nominalism, a theory that states that there are no universal essences in reality. The realist believes that objects of sense perception, or sometimes of cognition in general, are real on their own right and exist independently of their being known or related to mind. They also believe that human senses are deceptive, that revealed truth alone is reliable, and that human experience and human reason may be trusted only as far as they support the truth. The realists were headed by Anselm, Bishop of Canterbury, who was known as the father of Scholasticism. He advocated credo ut intelligum, or I believe in order that I may understand. For nominalists, mind can frame no single concept or image corresponding to any universal or general term. All general collective words or terms such as animal, man, tree have no objective real existence corresponding to them, but are mere words, names, terms, or vocal utterances. So they believe that only particular individual things and events exist. So we also have the conceptualism. It holds that universal concept exists in the mind as subjects of discourse. So this movement was spearheaded by Abelard, who advanced the idea intelligo ut credam, or I understand in order that I may believe. So in his book, Sic et non, o ye and nay, Abelard argued that the reason was antecedent of faith, the true fountain of the majority of Christian doctrines. For the philosophy and theology, we have the greatest one, Thomas Aquinas. He wrote the Summa Theologiae, which remained the authoritative presentation of doctrines of the Roman Catholic Church. So in 1879, Pope Leo XIII officially recognized this work as the basis of Catholic theology. So for Aquinas, contemplative life is the highest and best life, and that happiness is the most blessed virtue given by God to man. Now let's move on to the rise of the medieval university. So during the 13th century, Europe was ruled by several strong monarchs who forged alliance and peace treaties. Under the influence of monastic schools, institutions devoted to the teaching of medicine were established. So this became the first universities. They have associations, Universitas Magistrorum et Scholarium, which means Corporation of Teachers and Students. It was chartered by Emperor Frederick I of Bologna in 1158, and the University of Naples was chartered by Frederick II in the city of Naples in 1224. Now, let's go to the composition of the medieval university. The entire student tree was referred to as the Studium General. So, teachers and students who came from the same place of origin were organized as a nation, and each nation elected a leader called a councillor. Teachers who taught the same subject were called facultas. Of course, they were led by a dean. So, every year, the councillors and the deans met to elect a rector who served as the head of the university. So, the university enjoyed benefits and privileges. University teachers and scholars were exempted from military service and from paying local contributions. They also enjoyed internal jurisdiction. Only university officials could put to trial members charged with civil or criminal cases. They also had the right to grant degrees to the graduates, enabling the latter to teach anywhere without having to take further examinations. University officials also had the right to suspend lectures if they believe university privileges were being infringed on. So let us take a look at the degree offerings in the medieval university. So at age 13 or 14, a boy wishing to advance his knowledge may enroll in a university as an apprentice to a master for 3 to 7 years, depending upon his ability and intelligence. So as an apprentice, he studied liberal arts in preparation for teaching, read ordinary text and grammar, learned rhetoric and logic, and fulfilled similar requirements. After turning 21 years old, the apprentice was named as workman, who likewise trained younger boys while furthering his studies. So at 25, he studied disputation and familiarized himself with local texts. So in order to prove his ability and learning, he had to write a masterpiece or a thesis and publicly defend this thesis before his master. If he successfully passed this test, he was conferred the degree of a master, doctor, professor, or sophist. He was then granted the licentia docendi or license to teach anywhere. So lecture method was popularly used, followed by a debate or disputation. An oral examination followed the disputation. So let's proceed to chivalry, education as a social discipline. So it was the secular counterpart of monasticism. It aimed to attain the highest social ideals through forms and customs. So the main focus was development of the character of a gentleman. So these are the characters of a gentleman: honorable, dignified, God-fearing, respectful of authority. So this educational system is ideal only for the noble. So a knight's education was not held in formal school but in palaces and forts. So it was divided into 3 stages, each lasting for 7 years. So from age 7 until he turned 14, a child of noble origin acted as a page in the castle, attending the needs of noble ladies. So as a page, he learned courtly graces and manners, played musical instruments, took part in religious ceremonies, learned how to read and write. So at the age of 14, he was promoted as squire or an attendant to the knight. In this position, he learned to care for horses, use weapons, and practice courtesy, kindness, gentleness, generosity, and other desirable traits. He also accompanied his lord to tournaments and battles as well as hunting trips. He was also expected to learn the rudiments of love, war, and religion, sing and dance, tell stories. If he succeeded in these endeavors, the squire took the vow of a knight before his king and lady when he turned 21. So this vow expected him to defend the church, respect the priesthood, attack the wicked, protect women and the poor, preserve the tranquility of the country, and shed blood for the sake of his compatriots. On the other hand, a girl of noble birth was taught religion, palace rituals, and ceremonies, singing and dancing, and the management of household servants until her marriage to a knight. Now let's move on to the rise of the middle class. This is a new class of people between the nobles and the peasants. They are called burghees or the middle class. Members of this class were not wealthy nor poor. Rather, they acquired their fortune from profits in commercial and industrial endeavor. So the burghees had to protect their interests against the other classes, and to accomplish this goal, they established guilds or organizations of people engaged in the same profession for the protection of their interest and welfare. So they have the Merchant Guild, composed of businessmen who engage in buying and selling products. Crafts Guild, composed of skilled workers who manufactured and sold their own products. So before an individual could be accepted as full-fledged member of a guild, he must first pass 3 stages. As an apprentice, he was assigned to a master who trained him in the skills he needed in the trade. As a journeyman, he moved from one master to another as paid laborer, learning new skills in the process. Only after he had proven his worth as a worker would he be accepted as regular and full-fledged guild member, later becomes a master. So the development of the middle class saw the establishment of new schools. We have the chantry, the guild school, and the burgher school. Chantry school started as a foundation, a gift of property to a priest in exchange for his prayers for the soul of his benefactor and the latter's family. So the school was under the supervision of priests and clergy who trained children in grammar as well as in Latin language. The guild school was free from ecclesiastical control. Its main purpose was to orient and train a student to take over his father's profession upon the latter's retirement. So it was the predecessor of the modern vocational school. The burgher school was controlled and supported by secular authorities based in the cities. So the priests served as a teacher. They trained the students regarding morals and religion in addition to teaching them the 3 R's. Now let's proceed to Islamic influence on education. We have the Shahada or Muslim confession of faith. So the religion is described as Islam, which requires submission to God, and their God is called Allah. Muhammad is their prophet. They have purely monotheistic faith, and Islam is founded on the teachings of Muhammad. Muhammad acknowledged the Jewish prophets of Old Testament, even as he recognized Jesus Christ not as the Son of God, but as worthy predecessor of his own mission, which was to correct and restore God's revelation to man. Muslims devoted much time and attention to education. So in the 12th century, a well-organized system of education was adopted throughout all Islamic territories, including Spain. So in towns and cities, elementary or mosque schools were established for the teaching of reading, writing, arithmetic, geography, grammar, and religion. These were attended by both boys and girls. Muslims made remarkable advances in physics, medicine, surgery, and pharmacy toward the preservation of life. Also, they have introduced the Hindu-Arabic numerals. Muslims were already teaching geography using globes, astronomy in observatories, invented the pendulum clock, discovered nitric and sulfuric acid, introduced compass and gunpowder, raised cotton, rice, sugar, cultivated silkworms. They also excelled in navigation, controlling the European trade routes in the Mediterranean Sea, Red Sea, Arabian Sea, as well as the Indian Ocean. They were also able to explain the refraction of light, gravity, capillary action, and twilight. Also determined the height of the atmosphere, weight of air, and specific gravity of bodies. So that is the education during the medieval times. For your activity 1, this activity is called mini stations. So you're going to create an output that will summarize your learning on education. You can draw a concept map, or you can paint, you can illustrate through tables and other arts, graphical arts. Any output will do as long as it summarizes your learning on the education during the medieval time. After creating the output, you have to set it up to a mini station by posting it on your wall. After posting it, you have to write down the script on how are you going to present your output, and then document it and share it to our class. So it is like showcasing your output to everyone. It is called the mini station. So for that, please be guided by this rubric. Of course, your creativity, correctness of presentation. So after coming up with a mini station, you have to take a selfie and then write your script on how are you going to present it. You paste it in your personalized journal. And then you share your output with the class. That will be an individual activity. For your activity 2, role play, you have to come up with a role play with your group. Okay, so you have your own groups. You have to work with your group in this activity. Create a role play on the educational systems during the medieval times. Write the script on how are you going to do the role play, and then you're going to present your script in the class. Okay, for group 1, focus on Christianity to Episcopal schools. So portray a scenario there. Group 2, focus on Monasticism to Nominalism. Group 3, rise of medieval university to Chivalry. Group 4, the rise of middle class to the need for new schools. And Group 5, the Islamic influence. Your creativity, correctness of presentation, audiovisual impact of your presentation will determine your grade for this activity. You can have 2 or more scenarios depending on your script. You can also add transitions like advertisements and drama and other things. So you can also make it like a TV production. So if you have queries, please ask your instructor about it. So that's the end of our session. Thank you for listening.